Religion and peace. As a young historian of the relations between Islam and Christianism, many topics could be approached throughout history to discuss this apparent paradox. But after a discussion with Matthias Seder, we agreed that it should be necessary to talk about one very significant initiative which has been taken at the highest level of the Catholic Church by the different popes since the middle of the 80s. I will speak about the Assisi meetings. These interreligious meetings, first organized in 1986 and organized the last time in 2016 in the small city of Assisi in central Italy. Why is it significant today in Nairobi to speak about the 80s and the Assisi initiative? For three main reasons. First, because it is at this time that the Catholics empowered new modalities of action in the peace building, especially with an interreligious dimension. Secondly, because the Assisi meetings is relevant of what can a spiritual force do for the peace process even today. And thirdly, because the Assisi initiative points out issues still overwhelmingly important today for the interreligious peace process. First, so the 80s are the framework of the new Catholic modalities of action in the peace process, still interesting for us today. Obviously, spreading a message of peace was not something new for the Catholic Church in the 80s. However, Catholics used new modalities of actions, activities, for example, of a humanitarian nature first. Catholic NGOs, for example, have been created or reshaped to deal with particular subjects and problem issues, like, obviously, with the Middle East. The Lebanese crisis in the 80s became the heart of the political, associative, and even spiritual commitments of Western Catholics, particularly French, in favor of peace in the Middle East. Very quickly, however, the Middle East context trapped an engagement grappling with contradictions, often internal to the Christian faith, between appeals to justice and painful rediscovery of their Jewish roots. Western Christians rocked dangerously between support for Israel and defense of the Arab world. Alongside humanitarian activities, the most relevant characteristics of these years was the new importance of the contemplation. Faced with geopolitical context in tension, faced with new religious radicalizations, religious actors favored a contemplative mode of encounter. In the 80s, Christian-Muslim relations were marked by different initiatives. In Syria, for example, the Jesuit Paolo Dall'Olio created the Marmousa community to bring together Western and Eastern Christians with Muslims to pray for peace. In South France, diverse Islamo-Christian encounters were organized in diverse Benedictine monasteries. In Algeria, the Tiberine Cistercian community has been welcoming Ribat es Salam since 1979, born like an initiative of Muslim mystics who invited their monastic Christian neighbors to pray for peace. Christians and Muslims in Algeria met twice a year to discuss themes of spiritual life and to pray. And contemplative dialogue was encouraged at the highest level of the Catholic Church. In May 1986, in the Feast of Pentecost, John Paul II published an encyclical on the Holy Spirit, initiating a theology of the Holy Spirit according to which all authentic prayer comes from the Spirit. A few months earlier, he appealed not only to Catholics or Christians, but also to those who belong to different religions of the world, and to all people of goodwill, to contribute to inspiring a worldwide movement of prayer for peace beyond the borders of individual nations and involving believers of all religions. At the same time, the Pope announced his desire to organize a special meeting in Assisi, open to leaders of churches, Christian communities, and major world religions, a world interreligious day of prayer, of feast, of pilgrimage for peace. Second point, so Assisi meeting was very relevant for understanding the power of a spiritual force. The meeting of Assisi of October 27th, 1986, was rich of symbols. In the city of San Francis, distant prophet of the Islamic Christian dialogue in the Middle Ages, John Paul II brought together representatives of 12 world religions. The national origins of each of the delegations manifested the global dimension of the event. Regarding the Muslim delegation, for example, which included both Moroccans and Iranians, it is clear that it was a question of going beyond Arab representation. The meeting was also held in the context of the United Nations International Year of Peace. Yet, the Pope didn't invite other religious representatives to establish a program of concrete action. It was not a question of debating the major problems of society or geopolitics. The meeting in Assisi was dedicated to prayer and fasting for peace. Each religious representative had been invited to situate himself in what makes his originality, in his own contribution. For the Pope, it was also meant to concretize the intention of John 23rd, who in Pacem in Terris emphasized the peacemaking power of prayer. At Assisi, as he said, we have discovered in an extraordinary way the unique value of prayer for peace, and even that we cannot obtain peace without prayer, and the prayer of all, each in his own identity and in the search for truth. Because the Assisi meeting was part of a heavy international context, Euro missiles crisis in Europe, Afghanistan invasion by the USSR, apartheid in South Africa, crisis in Sudan, and obviously Middle East. Also, the context was that of a Western world accelerated by secularization, which is spreading today throughout the world, especially here, also in Africa. Assisi was getting back to the center of the international game. Religious actors would tend more and more to be marginalized by the decision-making powers. The challenge was also for religious to show that the commitment to peace is rooted essentially in a spiritual approach. It was a question of demonstrating that religions were not factors of war at a time when Ireland and the Middle East were burning around question of religious identities. Nevertheless, a theological reading of the event insists on the proper religious character of the Assisi meeting. However, we cannot deny the mediatic character of the meeting in Assisi. The sense of staging, Karol Wojtyla, John Paul II, practice of theater, took a universal dimension in Assisi and certainly captured the imagination of a world that for the first time in history saw the physical meeting of great religious chiefs. And staging also has a theological meaning. According to former Cardinal Echegaray, Assisi was the symbol, the staging of what the Church must be by vocation, proper in a world in flagrant state of religious pluralism. Because, and this is the third point, Assisi is significant of many issues with which we still have to deal today. John Paul II clearly explained the meaning of this gathering to pray in the same city. And I quote him, "The fact that we have come here doesn't imply any intention of seeking a religious consensus between us or negotiating our beliefs of faith. This doesn't mean that religions can be reconciled at the level of a common commitment in a terrestrial project that would surpass them all. Nor is it a concession to the relativism of religious beliefs." This is very important. For one of the most vocal critics of this Assisi meeting was about syncretism. At the extreme, the integrist Monseigneur Marcel Lefebvre and Monsignor Antonio de Castro-Mayer strongly condemned the Assisi meeting, the over-religious being, according to this leader of the integrist mainstream, called this over-religion as the fruit of the devil. Assisi had not been necessarily very well understood at the highest level of the Catholic Church as well. It has given rise to many questions, even reluctance within the Roman Curia in Rome. On December 22nd, for example, in the same year, 1986, in the Vatican, John Paul II was obliged to explain the sense of the Assisi meeting to the other cardinals. Again today, a whole job consists still of integrating interreligious dialogue into the mission of the Church, just as the announcements, and with a very strong interreligious approach, without an apologetic, pejorative approach. It is not obvious and raises still today a lot of questions among Christian communities, even internal tensions over the modalities of the gospel proclamation on the Christian side. Another issue concerns the place of religion in the public sphere. More specifically, the risk of confusion between interreligious dialogue and civic tolerance. The Assisi meeting clearly positions religious actors in the international arena for world peace. before repositioning them at the local level in favor of the living together, vivre ensemble, convivenza. This is important to understand that the spirit of Assisi inspired and can inspire today diverse initiatives at the local level, here also. The gathering of the religious representatives in the same city, for example, to call for urban peace. The creation of diverse group of young people who want to create a new atmosphere of understanding between people of different religions. And we could hope that a group of this kind could... Where is Hans? Hans, where are you? I don't know. But Hans was one of the students who want to create such a group here in Tangaza. An interreligious group here in a university with Muslims and Christians. It could be inspired as well by the Assisi movement. And I have to mention as well the work of the Sant'Egidio and the Focolare movements at different levels, even political. An ambiguity can nevertheless appear. Inscribed in the Catholic renewal designed by the Council Vatican II, the spirit of Assisi is not a united front of religions in a secularized world. In this context, and even more widely, the call for peace should not be interpreted as a very political and partisan position. And if the religious representatives of the world place themselves at the political level, is there not a risk of losing the prophetic flavor of the religious message they carry? It brings us to the very core of our problem today, the definition of peace. What does it mean to pray for peace? Is it to pray for the tranquility of my home, my community, hidden or protected behind electrical or mental wall? Or to pray for peace is something else? Assisi invites us to look down inside our own religious tradition, to shake our apparent and often material peace, to build a more human peace, founded on the care of the fellow being. Thank you.